Hey guys, Brian here. Just letting you know that we had some tech issues with Matt's mic. It might lag and sound choppy at times. I did my best to edit that out, but at certain points it was unavoidable. Our plan is to have that issue fixed before we record our next episode. We apologize for the issue and we appreciate you listening. Enjoy.
Hey, what is up? Welcome to TV Guys. I am Matt,
I'm Brian.
and today we are talking about our top three side characters. Now, these are the characters that they're not quite as cool as the lead billing guy, but usually they're much more interesting and you like their stories more. So we're going to give you our top three of who should you be watching besides your main character.
Exactly. This is a pretty easy one for me when I came up with this idea. There's one kind of unconventional idea that kind of just like immediately came to mind like right away.
And if you remember a couple of weeks ago, we did a different episode where we talked about the worst lead character. So, I mean, if you haven't seen that episode, that's a good episode for us. So we'll talk about that last time. So this is going to be a little different. And speaking, oh wait, no, we do trivia at the end. I'm still new to this. We're still figuring this out.
We could do it now.
We could do it now, but you and I didn't say beforehand. Oh no, I've got a good trivia one. We'll do it at the end. All right, guys, I know you're excited, but I'm sorry. We're going to save it for the end. All right, let's hear what's your number three for who is one of the best side characters in all of TV land?
Number three for me, have you ever seen One Day at a Time?
I have not. I don't even know what that is.
It was on Netflix for 3 seasons, and then it got canceled, and then it got picked up by Pop TV, and then it ran like a really short season that got canceled because of COVID, and then now I guess they're canceled again. But first 3 seasons are great. They're on Netflix. Just to clear this up, I do know that this is a remake of a show from the 70s of the same title. I have not seen any of that show. So if there are any like callbacks, there's obvious stuff that I'm missing. I'm sorry. I haven't seen that one. I've only seen the new one that started in 2017. It's about this family, this Cuban family, the Alvarez family, who lives in Sonora, California. It's a single mother and her 2 kids, and her mom, played by Rita Moreno, lives with them. They're not the characters I'm talking about. Like, that's the family. There's also the landlord named Schneider, and then also the mom's boss, Dr. Berkowitz, who becomes like a exclusively platonic, weirdly, with her mom, with the grandma.
Mm-hmm.
And it's weird. So Schneider, the landlord, he came from money. He's just like this rich guy, but he's not like a douchey rich guy. He's like super nice. And like they made a comment. I was watching some episodes in preparation. He hasn't raised their rent in 17 years of owning the building that they live in. And it's just always wants to be part of the family because he is kind of not really ostracized, but like comes from a family where his dad doesn't really care about him, and he's off by himself all the time. So him to being able to like hang out with his family really just gives him that sense of having a family and like belonging. And same kind of thing with Dr. Berkowitz, Leslie, is that he's divorced and he has adult kids who don't really want anything to do with him. So he's just lonely. And he starts this like, will they, won't they kind of thing with the grandma, with Lydia. Eventually it kind of comes out that she doesn't want any like romantic involvement because she's a widow, and she realized that she still feels a lot for her late husband. And she kind of like realizes that she can't be in a relationship with anybody else, but she still like hangs out with him all the time. And it's almost like I said, exclusively platonic. And it's both of these guys, like they have nothing really going on in their lives, but they still feel that sense of belonging with the Alvarez family. It's actually kind of a cool dynamic.
So yeah, so I haven't seen that show. Is it like a comedy? Is it a drama? Is it more like a dramedy? What type of show is it most like?
It's a comedy, but there's also some really dramatic moments within it. With these 2 characters I was talking about, they're able to go from comedy to being real quickly. There was an episode where the family goes on vacation, and both Dr. Berkowitz and Schneider go to their house while they're gone to like water the plants at the same time. They both realize like, we don't have anything else to do, so let's just hang out. It goes like a montage of them just hanging out at the house and cooking and doing all this stuff. And then all of a sudden, like they're sitting down having this like heart to heart about how Schneider's always wanted a father figure to say he's proud of him. And then Dr. Berkowitz is like, I've always wanted someone to think of me as a father figure for more than just my money. And it's like, it went from this crazy montage to them having a real moment real quickly. And it's just, every character on that show is funny, but I always gravitate towards those 2.
Sounds good. I'll have to check out that show sometime. I was gonna say that my next one is also a Netflix show, but that's actually my number 2. So I mean, spoiler alert, that's coming up. I've got a Netflix show. So this one isn't my number 3. This is not a Netflix show, but it is also a short-lived one that was cut too soon. But before I get into that, what I had initially thought until last night, I remembered this character. I was like, oh, I have to talk about them. My initial number 3 was going to be some character like Creed or like the Joker. You know, they are compelling because of the fact that they don't have much of a backstory. So you don't really know these things about them. And the mystery is what intrigues you about those characters. But then I thought of another character that actually has a good story, but they just didn't get to yet. And that's the character of Shepard Book from Firefly. Now, he's a very compelling character because as you're watching it, if you have never seen Firefly is like the peak epitome shows that got canceled. So you might not have ever seen the show, but maybe you've heard from people about Firefly. And so with Firefly, it's a space western from about 15 years ago.
I have never seen it, but you specifically have told me to watch it on several times.
See, Firefly, what's great about Firefly is it did get a nice ending. So, like, it got canceled too soon, but then fans resurrected it enough to be able to create the movie Serenity, which I thought really did a great job of tying everything together. And even though it didn't give all the answers you wanted from the questions it raised, it still was a solid enough ending that you could feel good about it. And actually, I saw Serenity first before I even watched Firefly, so I'm one of the weird ones, and it held up really well. But Shepard Book, he's a character in this space western who he's like this peaceful preacher guy, and he's this nice foil to the main character Malcolm Reynolds, who himself, he is a very interesting character. We've got like a very peaceful character. However, throughout the season, and especially in the movie, that you get all these hints that there's more to Shepard than him being a shepherd. You know, he wasn't always a pastor. And so you get this sense that he used to have these connections to what they call the Alliance. And the Alliance is like the big formation of central planets, the ones that are actually high class and have money and have taken care of by, big government, so to speak. Whereas these backwater planets that are far away from the central core, they don't have the protections of a police force, don't have protections of high quality medicine and technology and all that sort of stuff. So there's this huge class difference. And so they find out as it's going along, and they don't give too much detail of it, that Shepard was a part of that in the past, and he must have gotten away from that overall authoritative government to become a shepherd. And like the process he went through, very interesting. I wish that we would have gotten to see how that happened and that story that was told, but we never got that, unfortunately.
Some of this kind of sounds like it could fit in the Star Wars world.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. As I was thinking about Firefly, I'm realizing now that Mandalorian is a spiritual successor to Firefly. It's this Wild West situation on these outer planets.
Which, on that note, actually, since we recorded last, I've started The Mandalorian and already finished the first season.
Jeez, of course you did. Well done, sir. Just wait till the second season, buddy.
Yeah.
It's great.
Might have to be later tonight. We'll see. Is that all you had for your number 2? For number 1, I mean? Or 3? Or whatever number on?
That's for my number one of the numbers, whichever
Yes.
is 3. Yep.
All right. So my next one is got to be King of Queens with Kevin James and Leah Remini. I think by far that show lasted 9 years because of Jerry Stiller as Arthur Spooner, for sure. Who sadly passed away earlier this year.
Was it only this year?
Yeah, this year has taken so many, like him, Regis Philbin, Fred Willard, Alex Trebek. So many guys have died this year.
That's right. Yeah, it's like it feels like it was so long ago, even though it probably was only like 6 months.
Yeah, something like that. I got into King of Queens late. I didn't watch it live, but then I ended up buying the series set on DVD and just binging through all of it back when we were in college. And yeah, it's like the main story, it's okay. Like I said, I don't think it would have held up without Arthur. And it's that weird sense of You know, kind of the same thing when he was in Seinfeld. Like, he can just shout and be angry, but it's just so funny. Like, he can't say anything and not have it be just hilarious. Especially when they paired him up with Patton Oswalt, who just played like the very woe is me, I feel so bad for myself character. Whenever they were together, that was comedy gold. It's like, I don't want to see Kevin James right now. I want to keep seeing these guys.
Yeah, I agree. I wasn't a big King of Queens fan. I saw enough episodes to have a taste of it and know what I was missing out on for the other episodes. And it never really struck me as a show that I would like or watch, but I did like Arthur. I like Jerry Stiller because I'm a fan of angry comics. Like, I like Lewis Black. You know, if you can do it right, you do it really well. And I enjoy that brand of humor.
Jerry Stiller is like Lewis Black in 30 years.
That's scary and dangerous to think about all at once. Yeah, I talked about this in the Movies on a Monday podcast I did. We talked about Inside Out not too long ago, and casting Lewis Black as the voice of anger is like some of the best casting there is. Like, you don't have a better embodiment of anger.
All the cast in that movie was great.
Yeah,
I listened to that podcast, and my only complaint was that you never mentioned how great Phyllis was as Sadness.
It's true. Like, all of them, even Mindy Kaling, who didn't really have a whole lot to do as discussed, she still was really good. All of them are just perfect.
Yeah. She was basically playing herself, but that's fine. It worked for Kelly. It worked on The Office, and it worked there.
It's funny. Amy Poehler was kind of playing a version of herself. She's just this peppy, energetic go-getter.
Exactly.
Amy Poehler's the best when she's being that manic energy. All right. So my number 2 Netflix show that is like the pinnacle Netflix show, in my opinion, is Stranger Things. And I actually have 2 for Stranger Things in case you don't accept my initial answer, because to me, I feel like the main cast or the main characters are Will's mom and then the 4 kids, and well, actually kind of the 3 kids, but those boys and then 11, like those 5. And then Hopper's there too. To me, I consider Hopper a little bit of a side character, so that's why I would say he's my number 2. But if you don't accept that, the other pick is Steve Harrington, who is absolutely a side character. He's not even a regular in season 1. But real quick about Hopper, I really like his arcs. I just really enjoy it. If you haven't watched Stranger Things, it's pretty much all the 80s shoved into a TV show. They did a lot of borrowing from 80s movies and a lot of like even recreating shots from those movies. Like Hopper himself is named off of the sheriff from Jaws. And they even have some camera shots that are in the first season that are shot for shot redone of the same ones from Jaws. So, I mean, like, they really do a good job of doing homage to the 80s. But it's kind of like a horror. I wouldn't call it a horror because it's not that scary, but it's more like a thriller. But it has comedy drama in it. And Sheriff Hopper is as you could guess, sheriff of Hawkins, Indiana. And when weird things are happening there, he's trying to keep things together. And in the first season, he's dealing with being a drunkard and kind of a bit of a failure. And then like this gets thrown in his lap, and how does he actually grow into being a hero? And then the subsequent seasons after that, he is no longer that arc, which is great. They give him growth, and he's able to grow more and more as a hero of like, what does it mean to be a hero? What does it mean to be a father figure? What does it mean to be a hero of this community? So I love his arc, but then I love Steve Harrington's, especially in the first season. The first season, they did what you wouldn't expect, where he was the bully at the very beginning, but they must have realized that they had something special in this actor, and they decided to bring him back and to give him more, because he was a bully, but then they made him relatable. And then they also made him have regret, and they made him have remorse for his actions and turn around and to stop being a bully and to actually be a sympathetic character, especially from a show that's based off like the 80s ones where it's like bullies were the bad guys.
Yeah. Like that, like the bad guy in Back to the Future is just a bully.
Yeah. Which he's a great bad guy. It's amazing how good of a villain Biff is.
Yeah.
But that is all he is. That's his character development. He's a jerk. Except for in other movies where his dad is the jerk or his grandson is the jerk, and it's still the same actor. The whole line, the whole family sucks, but they're all really good villains. I love it.
Yeah, not to go too off topic, but my theory with like the whole grandson Griff in the future, like, who married Biff?
Yeah, that's that's like the that's the same thing as like the new Star Wars where the Emperor has procreated as well. Like, who would want that? You just I don't know how you did it, but a good job, sir. I guess.
Exactly. I haven't seen much of Stranger Things, but I think maybe after I finish The Mandalorian, I'll have to jump into Stranger Things.
Yeah, I really like it, and especially if you like '80s stuff, you're gonna like Stranger Things.
All right, but actually, the arc of Bully getting redemption kind of leads right into my number three, which was the this is the one that I said that
You
I
mean
thought of
number
right
one?
away.
We're so good with the numbers here.
Yeah,
My number something.
yeah. The next one. Okay, um, you're the same age as me, so I'm not sure if you grew up with the show. Did you watch Power Rangers growing up?
I did watch Power Rangers growing up. You bet.
Okay, so by far, if you're looking at it, the characters that have the most development are Bulk and Skull.
Oh my God. We are guys. We are going here. This
Yeah,
is where we're going with this episode. Bulk and Skull as the number one for Brian.
yeah. Oh, but hear me out. So, like, it's not just Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. So, Mighty Morphin led into Power Rangers Zeo, Power Rangers Turbo, and then Power Rangers in Space. And then there's a bunch after that that we're not talking about. But those four shows, Bulk and Skull, are, first of all, they're the longest lasting original characters. They're on the show longer than anyone else on the entire show. And they're the ones who were actually allowed to have an arc. Because the thing about Power Rangers, they were really trying to hammer home the idea that, the show isn't just about punching and kicking, it's about these kids who are being responsible. So like the main characters, the Power Rangers, weren't allowed to really have any flaws. They had to be the role models. They had to be the ones who were having good grades in school and leading the recycling club and all this kind of stuff. Like that's why there were so many episodes where one of them had to turn evil by an evil spell, because that's how you got any interesting character development out of them. It had to be evilly, like the most interesting Tommy ever got was when he was turned evil by Rita. Then he became good and it's just one of the Power Rangers. Whereas Bulk and Skull got to start out as douchey bullies who just got goop on their face and like were just mean all the time. And then they eventually started to grow and develop. Specifically in the third season when they became junior cops. And initially they did it just to get girls, but then they actually tried to better themselves because they had the role model and like the father figure of Lieutenant Stone. And from that point on, they weren't just the bullies. They were like these bumbling guys who were just trying to do good. And that led all the way to Power Rangers in Space. So did you make it all the way to Power Rangers in Space, Matt?
I didn't make it that far. No.
So Power Rangers in Space, to me, has one of the best finales of all time. And I know that sounds dumb, but I'll stand by that, because that was going to be the end of the franchise. They were going to be ending Power Rangers, but then Power Rangers in Space was so good that they kept it going for another 20 years. And so at the end of Power Rangers in Space, all the villains for the past seasons, Rita and Zed, the Machine Empire, everybody, they were all attacking. There's Bulk and Skull who stood up, and it was like a Spartacus moment where they're trying to say, like, Power Rangers, reveal yourself. And Bulk stood up and said, I'm the Blue Ranger. And Skull came up and said, I'm the Black Ranger. And they led like the civilian charge. Like the civilians started fighting the villains with the Power Rangers, led by Bulk and Skull, because they were realizing like these guys have always been there for us, and that's our chance to be there for them. Forward, go all the way back to these are the same guys in the first episode were just trying to bully girls into going on dates with them, and they got a pie in their face. And then you go ahead 6 years, and all of a sudden they're standing up to the villains, doing the right thing, and just having that great moment. And that's some real character development.
Especially for a show that's an after-school special about use your words instead of fighting. But even though you should use your words, let's show you guys fighting.
Yeah.
They didn't have the best on-brand messaging. I love how every single show ended with, well, don't actually fight.
Never mind that we have a giant robot dragon that comes out of the sea to fight bad guys. You don't need that. You just need to use your words.
Hey, giant robot dragon, can you please stop? You're hurting our feelings.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. That Bulk and Skull, they weren't the role models. They weren't the ones that they were trying to look up to. So but they also weren't the villains. They were kind of in this middle ground where there's a lot of room to play with those guys. And not to mention, these guys were actually really good actors. Like Jason Narvey, the guy who plays Skull, has actually taught like Shakespeare at universities.
Well, how about that? See, you know, I've talked you up in other circles. So if anyone who's ever heard me talk about how Brian's like really like the smartest person I know about TV stuff, it's because of stuff like that. He knows not only what those two characters' names are, he knows the actors, and he also knows what they do in their spare time. So I mean, like, you're an encyclopedia of TV knowledge, my friend.
I also know that in the show they're not just Bulk and Skull; they're technically Farkas Bulkmeyer and Eugene Skulovich.
Jeez. Gosh, if you guys ever like have a phone a friend option, you're on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, just make sure you got Brian on there. And if it's a TV question, he'll get you right. Even though he hasn't seen Stranger Things
or Firefly. I know. I gotta stop watching Power Rangers and catch up on good shows.
Well, my number one, I guarantee you have, but I'm gonna ask for clarification because I have two that I could talk about, and one of them I could see the argument being that they're not really a side character. Okay. So the one that I would actually put would be Ron Swanson from Parks and Rec. He steals the entire show for me, but I can understand you saying that he is not a side character, that he's a main character. What's the judges? What is your response?
Yeah, I would have to say, I think after Leslie, I would probably rank him second billing, but you're also absolutely right. Ron Swanson, everything that comes out of his mouth is quotable.
Yeah, I love both his political ideology, even though it's like an exaggeration of what I probably is my political ideology. It's still just hilarious. His no nonsense, like, old school way of thinking, and it's politically incorrect at times. One of my favorite lines of his is like, do you have any food allergies, to like the new Boy Scouts he's got, and they're like, no. He's like, that's correct, you do not. I love just some of his matter of fact comments. But since he is second billing, I'll go ahead and withdraw this, even though he's the star to me. I love him. My pick then would be the janitor from Scrubs.
Oh, definitely.
The janitor, he's pretty, let's be honest, he is pretty one-dimensional, but he plays that dimension super well. And he toys that line to the point where, like, you really don't know what you're going to get out of him. Even though his whole thing is, like, he's crazy and he hates JD. That's really his arc. Being crazy allows you to go in a whole lot of different directions. The meetings that he has, what are the brain trust?
Yeah.
Those meetings that he has, that's hilarious every single time. One of my favorite janitor moments is when JD has like this one chance to sleep with whoever that guest star was before she leaves for good. And he's like, I've got to get to her before she's gone.
I think it's Heather Graham.
I want to say it was. Yeah, I wanted to say it was Heather Graham. It's like, this is my one chance. And so then he runs out of the hospital and janitor is there. And he's like, please, I need a ride. I need to get to, this is my one chance. He's like, say no more, get in. And then he drives him to the middle of nowhere and kicks him out. And JD's like, what are you doing? And he's like, it's been 4 years. How do you not get this? And he just drives away. That's my favorite janitor moment of all the seasons.
Well, and it's also brought to it because Neil Flynn is like a master improviser. There's been jokes that a lot of times in the scripts that would just say, Neil will say something funny here, and he just makes up something.
You can tell when he just goes off on a tangent and you're like, where did that come from?
One of the ones that I've heard that he improvised, which is great. You've seen the scene where JD is riding a scooter. He goes in a puddle that's so deep he goes under the parking lot, comes up a hole, and talks about meeting a manatee. And the janitor's just like, you didn't exchange pleasantries. That must be Julian. And just like that little detail was, I guess, made up by Neil Flynn. But yeah, he's one of those. He's kind of like Creed, where you never really know if anything he says is true, but it doesn't really matter because he's just hilarious.
Yeah, especially another one of the great moments of his was when they were self-referential and they showed his role in The Fugitive, where Neil Flynn, the actor, was actually in the movie, and he had a moment to stop Harrison Ford's character. And so then JD's watching this movie and he sees the janitor in the movie, and he's like, what, was the janitor in The Fugitive? So they got to play with that for an episode, which was hilarious.
Yeah. Have you heard the thing about how the janitor may have been imaginary if the show never got picked up for a second season?
Yeah, I thought that was pretty much for sure because if I mean, as you're about to say, if you notice, he doesn't interact with anyone else except for JD in that first season.
Yeah, I guess Bill Lawrence, the creator, his idea was if they didn't get picked up for a second season, that it's going to they were going to reveal that the janitor didn't actually exist and he was just in JD's imagination. But then when they got picked up, like, well, sounds like we're actually going to make more of these seasons. That'd be hard to keep up for however many years. So they dropped that idea.
Well, they kind of reused it.
Yeah.
They reused it with Brendan Fraser when he was a guest star for a couple episodes.
Yeah, that's true. Which, if we're ever going to talk about sad moments in sitcoms, that one's got to be on one of our lists for sure.
Yeah. Yep, absolutely. If we're sad moments in sitcoms, Scrubs is going to be on both of our lists. And I actually have a different moment, even though that Brendan Fraser one is up there.
Yeah, that's one of the more well-known moments kind of thing. But there's a reason that Neil Flynn was on TV for so long, because right after Scrubs, he went right to being in The Middle for another 9 years, which I saw bits and pieces of The Middle. That was pretty good too.
Yeah, the Middle had Neil Flynn and Patricia Heaton, and they're both very good actors. Mm-hmm. And I know people who liked it. It just I don't think it was my kind of show. And maybe with sitcoms, it can be hard where if you don't let yourself grow into the characters, you're not going to give it too much of a shot. So I might not have allowed myself properly to grow into the characters, but it didn't resonate with me.
But also, I liked how they wrote the janitor in the last season of Scrubs, which the forbidden season, what you want to call it, the med school season where most of them left and they just had new people all the time. Remember how they wrote the janitor out in that season?
Oh yeah, right away. Or it's like, what, JD left and he just drops the mop?
Yeah. He came back just for the one scene because I think he was already doing The Middle at that point, which is why he didn't come back to it. But yeah, the janitor is definitely a good pick for that.
Yeah, and if we're talking about that last season of Scrubs, that was supposed to be a spinoff, but then they just ended up calling it a last season because it didn't get the traction that they wanted. So, I mean, I don't consider that last season to really be a last season. I consider it to be a pilot spinoff, and it was only one season of a show that it didn't quite work. It was close. It had some good moments, but not the same.
I think this whole issue this whole concept of side characters being more interesting, you kind of mentioned it in one of our other podcasts, how you don't typically like the main character of shows. I think it's probably because so much weight is put on the main character. Like, they're supposed to be the one driving the story. They got so much on them. Whereas the other characters like, Creed or the janitor or Arthur, they can just pop in and say something hilarious and leave. And you're like, wait, I want to see more of that guy. And I think that might be part of the effect of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Because, I mean, you look at something that we talked about, How I Met Your Mother. You look at Ted, and his whole thing is this thing with Robin, and will they, won't they, and some of his romantic life. And he's really carrying the weight of who am I going to end up with? Who I want to make sure I'm loved. And that gets stale. It got stale after a couple seasons. With like New Girl, Zooey Deschanel, she's in a similar predicament. It didn't quite get stale like How I Met Your Mother did for her. But there was still a little bit of like the, who am I going to end up with? Who am I going to love? And all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And you allowed characters like Winston to just be like, I'm crazy. I got a cat. I'm going to prank you. All his fun little stuff. Winston almost made my list because Winston is just a great character.
Yeah, I've been watching a little bit of New Girl on and off because Anna's rewatching it. And there's one moment, I want to say it now because I'm sure it might end up coming up on another podcast. There's one Winston moment. It doesn't surprise me because I know it's coming, but I cannot help but outwardly laugh out loud every time I hear it. It's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, when you know it's coming and you still laugh, there's a number of those for like Office or New Girl or Parks and Rec that I have when we do our watch throughs. I feel like I watch those shows more than like any other one. So that's why you might hear us talk about or by us, I mean me, talk about those a lot.
Should we go to the trivia?
Let's go to the trivia. I don't remember what the trivia question was last week, but I can give you a new one once Brian remembers what it was. I'm sure you got it.
Yeah, it was what character from This Is Us is also in Guardians of the Galaxy 2?
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
Toby. I don't know the actor's name. I can't remember it. I'm sorry.
Chris Sullivan,
and
who plays Toby.
Taserface.
Which is such a ridiculous character. And I didn't read the comics. I'm sure he was in the comics, but I love how they just put a lampshade on. Like, yeah, we know the Taserface is a dumb name.
He was. Yeah, absolutely. I love I love them being able to do that. Be like, you know what? This is stupid. Let's just highlight how stupid it is, and we'll all have a good laugh about it.
Mm-hmm.
Guardians 2 was pretty funny, but I think I've said it whenever I've talked about Guardians 2 is it's like all the characters in the movie, they laugh at their own jokes, and it's like, you guys don't have to be laughing for us to laugh too.
Yeah.
We get that what you're saying is funny.
Mm-hmm.
It kind of ruins a little bit of it with that. But.
Yeah. All right, so Matt, what's this week's trivia question?
All right, so since I brought up Stranger Things, there is a actor from Stranger Things who is related to an actor from Parks and Recreation. Which two actors are related? Let me know.
I think
and
I
if
know
you have
this.
the characters that you might. If you don't know this and then you know those shows and I tell you the characters, you'll be like, oh, I see it. Yep.
Yeah. I didn't know they were actually related. I remember seeing pictures of them side by side and everyone saying, oh my gosh, they look so much alike. I didn't know they were actually related.
They are. They're brothers. That's a hint for you.
There you go.
Cross off all the girls from either of those episodes.
Was that an intentional clue or did you just accidentally do that?
I don't. It's all right. You either know it or you don't know it. So
yeah. I think that's all we got for today, right?
All right. We just started this. We got this podcast just started. So we are open for feedback. Let us know what are shows you want us to talk about. Next week, we're talking about a specific show. So we are actually going to talk about The Office. And so if you are an Office fan, we're talking about some of the best moments out of The Office. If you have some options and you're like, guys, you have to talk about this, let us know. We want to hear from you. But
and
until then, my name's Matt. No, go ahead. Just a heads up. Let us know.
Oh. Sorry. I'll say, just a warning, there are so many good moments in The Office. We will absolutely miss some great moments just because we don't have 5 hours to talk about every great moment of The Office. That's
true. You are going to be mad that we're going to not talk about yours. I guarantee it. So, should we gosh, let's do it again. Right. The end. Hey, I'm Matt.
I'm Brian.
And we're reminding you to stay tuned and keep watching.